Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Quincy Climate Action Network's Candidate Night for 2019. I'm David Reich, and I'm grateful for your turning out. Last time I spoke from this podium at our 2017 Candidate Night, I spent a few minutes discussing the reality of climate change, thinking that not everyone in the crowd would be fully convinced that the climate is changing. But after the floods that we saw here in Quincy in 2018, with all the destruction they brought, I'm going to assume that almost no one in Quincy still doubts the reality of climate change. Now that we agree that the climate is changing rapidly in ways that threaten life and property, and actually our way of life, we need to figure out what to do about it. The city has been talking about improved seawalls and emergency evacuation plans, and we're surely going to need those things. But greenhouse gas emissions at current levels will eventually lead to sea level rise of 20 feet or more, according to some scientists. That means we're going to need more than seawalls and evacuation plans. We're going to need to start reducing those emissions, and we'll need to do it quickly and dramatically by getting far more efficient in our personal and public lives and ending our reliance on fossil fuels, among other climate-friendly practices. During the 7 years since QCAN was founded, the city, with our strong encouragement, has taken some good steps in both areas, making several of its buildings more energy efficient and increasing the use of renewable power in schools and other city buildings. A few years ago, the city, along with National Grid, sponsored a program to get residents to sign up for free energy audits. And if you haven't done that yet, I'm begging you to do it now. It's a way to save a lot of money and get a lot of free stuff for your house. So please do it. You can easily sign up for an energy audit through the QCAN website, qcan.org. It's on our homepage. On the right-hand side, you just scroll down an inch or two. Do it. You'll save money. You'll help the planet. Meanwhile, ongoing efforts supported by QCAN may eventually decrease the greenhouse gas emissions from Quincy's solid waste disposal operations and increase the use of renewable electric power by Quincy ratepayers. In addition to addressing the climate crisis, measures like these can end up saving money and cleaning up the air we breathe, making them even more attractive. So, okay, Quincy has made a start, but the size of the threat forces us to view it as just that, a start. Therefore, this evening, we'll be asking the candidates about next steps in Quincy's fight against climate change. At our candidate night 2 years ago, I listed all the ways QCAN was leading in that fight. By now, though, the list of things we have done has gotten so long that instead of reading off a long litany of accomplishments and taking time away from our candidates for public office, I'm just going to refer you to our website again, www.qcan.org. Take a look at the website and see if you'd like to join our fight. If you want to take a small step right away, you can sign up for our friends list, and Faye and Ida over at the table there can sign you up for that. If you sign up for the friends list, you'll get occasional emails about films and lectures that we sponsor, and things like council meetings where city council meetings where climate-related measures are on the agenda. If you were a QCAN friend, for instance, you'd hear about our upcoming lecture on the effects of climate change on New England forests by Pamela Templer, a professor and researcher from Boston University. Please come. It's at the main branch of the Thomas Crane Library at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, October 29th. And for more details, again, you can check our website, quincycan.org or qcan.org. Either one will get you there. We're also encouraging QCAN friends to come to the City Council forum on the plastic bag ban. And that's happening this Monday in the City Council chambers at 7 p.m. QCAN's position on the ban is also right there on our website, www.qcan.org. And don't forget to sign up for our friends list again, right over there. Also at that table, we're selling the last of the QCAN t-shirts until we order some more. And they have the snazzy QCAN logo. That's a small one. It's a modest $10, and it'll help you in case you're looking to update your wardrobe. We're also glad to accept donations of any size. There's a nice jar there for your generous donations if you want to do that. Now, if you want to take a slightly bigger step towards enlisting in the fight against climate change, you can attend a QCAN meeting. We meet at 7 p.m. the second Wednesday of every month, except for December and July. Our meeting location is in flux right now, but the QCAN website will have info in time for you to visit our November 13th meeting. And our website, one more time, www.qcan.org. If you visit one of our meetings, I think you'll like what you hear. After all, by coming to this candidate night, you've shown that you care about climate change and are hoping the city will put up a maximal effort to fight it. As you're about to see, this year's candidate night features candidates for councilor at large and most of the contested ward council seats. We'll also hear from Mayor Koch's Chief of Staff, Chris Walker. He'll be speaking on behalf of the mayor, who tells us that he can't be with us tonight because of an event with Governor Baker. QCAN thanks all the candidates for running for office and coming here to share their views, and we thank the rest of you for coming to hear them. The evening will take the following order. First, we'll have 3 panels of ward council candidates, wards 1, 5, and 6 in that order. We also invited the candidates for Ward 3 City Councilor. Ian Kane declined, citing a schedule conflict, and Heriberto Soto didn't reply to our invitation, so they won't be with us tonight. After the ward council candidates, we'll have a panel for 4 at-large council candidates. For all 5 at-large council candidates. And then we'll hear from Mayoral Chief of Staff Chris Walker and the mayor's opponent, Brenda Ryan. And we're looking forward to that. Format is very simple, questions and answers, that's it. Our QCAN member, Sarah Belfort, will be posing the questions, and I'll ask her to come up to the stage right now so that I can get out of the way and leave you in Sarah's hands.
Okay, thank you, David. I'd like to personally extend a warm welcome to all of the candidates and to everyone who made time to come out tonight. Thank you. We're going to begin with the candidates for Ward 1 Councilor, so if you could please come up here. And one more thing, we'll allow a maximum of 1 minute for response to the questions. We'll pose a question. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to that, and we'll move on. And Martha, who's sitting right in the middle of the front row, will have some, will help you know where you are with time with the cards that she's holding for the candidates, okay? Great, so beginning with David, why should a voter whose #1 issue is climate change vote for you instead of your opponent?
First of all, thank you. I want to thank you, Ken, for having us here tonight. Thank you. I hope you can hear me. I want to thank QCAN for having it again this night, again this year. I know the organization is getting stronger, and I know that over the last 2 years, I had more of a baptism in getting involved in climate issues in Ward 1. One of the points that I want to bring up to this question about why folks should vote for me is results. We talked a little bit, I know that David mentioned the Seawall program. We jumped into the Seawall program with the administration full force, made sure we made the right moves, had the right meetings, and also brought in not only the seawall to protection of the houses and the folks in Ward 1, but also the wetlands. I've been an avid opponent against the compressor station down in Weymouth. I lived in Braintree for a little bit, and with Ward 1, with Germantown and House Neck on the border of it, I think it's a big problem. So I want to stay on those two issues and finish them off.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, QCAN, for hosting this. I think the reason you should vote for me, as opposed to Dave, is just a sense of urgency. After I got involved in 2017 running for office, I joined QCAN, and I became an active member because I care about the environment and I want to help. Now, there's people who are experts on environments, and there's people who can help get things done. I'm one of the latter. I don't understand the science, but you tell me something we need to get done, I'm going to help find a way to activate the people to get it done. Unfortunately, I was disappointed after I joined QCAN that we extended an invitation to Dave to come to one of our meetings and meet with us either at a meeting or we would have come to him. To my knowledge, he still has not accepted that invitation. I take the climate change issue very seriously, and as your Ward 1 counselor, I will continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next question. For this one, we'll start with Joe. What do you see as the biggest environmental problems affecting Ward 1 and its residents, and which is of greatest concern to you? How do you propose to address it?
Okay, well, the greatest, I would say there's two levels. Ward 1 is part of Quincy, and Quincy needs to be more of a leader as far as local environmental policy. Obviously, seawalls, tide gates, and storm drainage are things that we need to prioritize in a much more urgent fashion. We've seen what the administration can do when it cares about something. If it doesn't want a bridge to get built, guess what? It's on it like lightning, okay? If it decides seemingly out of nowhere that it wants to put up a special education center, a press conference is called before half the government even knows it's happening. But seawalls, we're out 2 years later, and we're still hearing, we gotta wait for money, we're doing it, we're getting closer, and I'm glad we're getting closer, but there's no urgency. So I think the most pressing environmental concern we have in Ward 1 is a lack of urgency by the government and the leaders that we have right now, and we need to get new ones. Thank you.
Thank you. In regards to urgency, I totally disagree with my opponent's comments. That seawall issue that we had here now, we've gone through multiple community meetings with all the neighborhoods. There are folks in here that have been at multiple meetings, so we got the design right, the drainage right, and community input. It wasn't going to happen overnight. On October 30th, coming up in a week or so, we have a large community meeting that's been mailed out to everyone up at City Hall to discuss now the company that's going to put it in, how it's going to be executed, how we're going to go about treating your property with respect, and what we need to do in regards to access to the beach. So the seawall issue is far from being neglected. I'm surprised he said that. I'm surprised people say that. That was the first thing that the administration and myself tackled right off the bat, and we kept our head down the whole way. That is a big issue. And by helping the seawalls and helping the marshlands, the wetlands, the tide gates, it is going to help the entire area. And to say it hasn't been expedited is far from the truth.
Okay, next question. Again, we're alternating, so we'll just start with you. Okay. Apartment buildings in Quincy with more than 8 units must use private contractors to remove their solid waste, meaning that many don't recycle or have limited recycling. How can the city help apartment dwellers recycle more?
Thank you. I think this was one of our advanced questions, and I took a look at it, and it falls into question 10 and 11 here on the questions that were given to us. You really got to look at an ordinance change that would work. More education aimed at the multi-units with an easy solution for them to execute. And again, it'd be something that could be built into an apartment scenario with the city oversight. To get people overall, I think the residential that I see does a good job on getting their recycling out. But to get the apartments to do it, I think we'd probably have to look at other locations, larger locations for apartments to bring their recycling so that they're not just leaving it and mixing it in with the trash. Try to make it as easy as possible to get these folks that are in apartments and in condos into central areas possibly around the city, besides just directing them down to the DPW on a day to drop off their recyclables if they had to. So multiple locations and something that really needs to be talked about.
Yeah, I actually agree with a lot of that. If you look at the line going down C Street on hazardous waste drop-off day, it goes all the way around, I think, past Wendy's sometimes. People want to do the right thing. They want to recycle. They don't want to throw stuff in our garbage and send it to landfills that doesn't belong there. What we need to do is make it easier, as Dave said. At Atherton Howe, where my children go to school, we have a textile bin. It is completely full all the time. People want to do the right thing. So what we need to do is provide plenty of depots where they can take their stuff on their way to work, on their way to dinner, on their way home, and make it as simple as possible. And we need to do outreach. As I've said before, if we candidates and elected officials are willing to knock on your door to ask for your vote, we can knock on your door and ask how your recycling is going, asking what you need, let you know what's coming out. Instead of sending a mailer or putting it in the Quincy Sun, we can do more outreach to make it very simple and very clear what can be recycled, what can't be. Because right now, the mystification of recycling since China stopped allowing us to send just about everything has turned a lot of people off, and they're just shrugging. So we can do it, but thank you.
Okay, continuing with the recycling issue, you've both touched on residential recycling. So follow-up question, many of us do have access to curbside recycling, yet the city's recycling rate has been stuck at a very low rate for years. It's only 15% of total waste by weight. So any additional specifics that you'd like to add for how we could increase the city's recycling rate for curbside recycling? Joe.
It's a lot of the same things. We need to make drop-off locations ubiquitous. We need to add education and outreach. I think there should be new homeowner packets that are sent out by the city that demystify the process. I believe we can use the schools as well. School kids care about the environment so much. As a matter of fact, I think the plastic bag ban, Mayor Koch is quoted as saying that he changed his mind on it because middle school students wrote him a letter. So we can use our schools. We can set recycling goals. And if the kids are home saying, Mom, you can't put that in the trash, guess what? They're going to listen. So we can start in the schools. QCAN does a good job. They go to the schools now and talk to people. But if we hit it from a couple fronts, send mailers out to new homeowners, use our public officials to do outreach, and use the schools to set recycling goals for each family, we can definitely get that abysmal rate much higher.
Pretty much the same answer. The education end of things, especially to our younger kids at the elementary and middle school level, and even the high school level, has to be stronger. And a better message has got to be put out. Again, when you're riding around the city, you do see a lot of the blue bins out. You see a lot of the people trying to do the right thing. The rate, though, and the percentage tells the story. We can do better, but I think it is outreach by the city and by the elected officials and by the groups that are here, not just QCAN, other groups that can get involved, and the education aspect of things at all levels to be strengthened, and maybe even, and I'm not clear on the message. I know that they'll have their recycling conversations in school at the different levels, but maybe we can take a look at that message and beef it up so that it's a little more clearer and a little more appeasable to people to be able to do it, because you got to make it easier. It's pretty easy to put the trash out, but if there was other locations or the recycling out, if there's other locations and other options, it would just make it easier, because it's hard to teach some old dogs new tricks. Thank you.
Okay, so roughly 3 years ago, the City Council passed a resolution calling for the city to consider adding electric vehicles to its fleet. Yet the city fleet still has no EVs or even a hybrid vehicle. Why do you think that is?
Thank you. Yeah, I looked at that immediately when I couldn't put my finger on it. And I know that the city has, I think, a vehicle or two that is a hybrid gas mix. But electric vehicles are way overdue for us to start to look at. I don't know why it hasn't been pushed forward. It might be a budget issue. But I think it's got to be looked at. I know that the new garage that's going up in the Hancock lot is going to have the stations to hook up electric cars. So I think that option will be something that you'll see in a lot of the new development. But I also know that, and it's probably a question that might be asked, some of the cars that could do it now are inspectional services, maybe the health department, some of the management cars right off the bat to make sure they respond well in New England weather, and make sure we don't run into anything that would bother us out there in our city services role.
This question came up in 2017 when I ran, and I pushed that night too. Nothing's happened. We don't have any electric vehicles. Now, maybe we have a hybrid or two, but not to my knowledge. There's no urgency. I keep coming back to it. I shouldn't say that. There's a lot of people in the administration that don't really acknowledge a problem. We have pictures of our police officers wading through 6 feet of water on C Street during the flood, but we still don't take this problem urgently. I tell you right now, you need to elect city councilors that care about this. It's not going to happen from the top. It's going to happen from the legislative. Braintree went to an electric fleet or partially electric fleet, and they're saving money. If no other reason, we should be doing this to save money. It's a no-brainer, but there's no urgency because it's not something that they're that interested in. I'm telling you folks, the change has got to come from the legislative side of things. It's not going to come top down.
Okay. Thank you to both of you. And that's our Ward 1 candidate. Okay. Thanks. I'd like to ask the candidates for, well, we don't have Ward 3 candidates for Ward 5. Counselor, please come up. All right, we'll begin the same way we began with Ward 1. Why should a voter whose number one issue is climate change vote for you instead of your opponent?
Hello, everybody. I'm Steve Christo. Hope you can hear me. This is my first time in politics, and I'm just going to take a little time to tell you a funny story of what happened today. It's getting close to the end, and my wife and I were at home, and we were discussing things, let's say, and she goes, "You know, this would be so much easier to do without you." That's what she said to me. And I thought, well, that's a little difficult to do. But my thing with respect to climate, and I'm no expert, but looking at it broadly and from a 50,000 foot level, I think we need to do something. My grandfather has three grandchildren, and I'm 62 years old, and I think everybody in this room, and Chuck, I think you and I are the same age. roughly. And, I don't think we've done enough, at all, to, to address the climate, the environment, and the like, and leave it better for the next generation. I don't think we've done enough.
One of the reasons I feel that I guess I'm asking for your vote is my experience. I was a city councilor back in 1988 till 1996. I was very proud to work with then Councilor Larry Cretion to bring the first recycling into Quincy. At the time, there was a lot of naysayers, and I signed on to it, and we went through it, and we had a lot of battles in those days to get it through, but we eventually got it through. We're the first city of our size in the area to have done it. So I'm very proud of that. And I think that my background on working on issues on Blacks Creek, on the watershed, those have always been very near and dear to me. And on climate change, unlike our president, I believe it is a major problem. And I will work with the mayor's office and the other city councilors to come up with policies that will help it, not 10 years from now, but as soon as possible.
Okay. Okay, next question will go first to Chuck. What are the biggest environmental problems affecting Ward 5 and the residents? Which is of greatest concern to you, and how would you propose to address it?
Well, I think the climate change is of great concern to me. I think there are steps that we can do and do fairly quickly. We only have half of our public buildings have solar panels on it. We could have more. We certainly could have the rest of them on it. Plus, it saves money. I believe in. There's a lot of the fleet in the city that could be electric cars, could be hybrids, and I would work to see that happens. I think one of the other big issues in Ward 5, particularly some of our waterways, like Furnace Brook, runs down into a watershed that runs down into Blacks Creek. If the tide gates aren't maintained with some of the storms we've had, we can have a lot of damage in a lot of those houses. So it's very important. I've always been on top of that issues to make sure that those issues don't affect people and people aren't flooded out.
A little bit closer, okay. Sorry, everybody, earlier. Well, I think from my perspective, I think our emergency preparedness is weak as a city. We've got a 27, 28-mile coastline, depending on who you look at. And I don't think, the city's ready for, that, 100-year storm. And, it happened in New Jersey with the Storm Sandy. Something like that happens here, we've got a big problem. And it does go back to urgency. And then one of the other things that I have to say is these issues aren't brand new. I'm not the first one to speak to them in this city council. You need to ask, why hasn't anything been done? Why hasn't anything been done at all? We come up here, we talk, nothing happens. So my view is I'm going to go at it and I'm going to challenge it wherever it makes sense. And I think we just need to get there, and we need somebody that can move it forward. Thank you.
Okay, next question, we'll start with Steve. The city has several buildings in various stages of planning and construction, including the new public safety headquarters. These buildings will be with us for upwards of half a century. Should the committees overseeing the construction of these buildings include someone whose sole concern is assuring that the buildings are designed in such a way as to maximize energy efficiency?
Yes.
Well, in that, we have a follow-up since we have time. Can you think of anyone on the city payroll with the expertise to fill that role?
No, I really can't. I don't know honestly enough about the administration at this point from a specific level. But, you know, I just think that we can do more everywhere with respect to building, and I sort of, you know, look back to like sort of this definition of LEED and that type of thing, and the words are just, you know, amazing. Like, why wouldn't we, you know, go at it? You know, it's looking, you know, and I'm going to quote it from the thing. I got a little time here, but, you know, it provides guidelines to keep independent, you know, verification, allowing for design, construction, operation, and maintenance of resource-efficient, listen to these words, high-performing, healthy, cost-efficient buildings. I mean, you know, it's something that we need to look at. Existing buildings and things like that, it's very difficult to do, but there's a lot we can do, and I think we need to go back to a point I make regularly, is we need everybody, including the developers, to start being, you know, better corporate citizens and foster better stewardship of our community if they're going to be, you know, doing some of the work. We all have to share, but always with the neighbors, you know, viewpoint. Thank you.
Yeah, same question. Yes, the question was about the city buildings in various stages of planning and construction. Excuse me. Should the committees overseeing the construction of these buildings include someone whose sole concern is assuring that the buildings are designed in such a way as to maximize energy efficiency? And if so, can you think who might be able to fill that role?
Well, right now, I think we should. I guess my answer is the same, yes. And but one of the things I think is some of this is probably a little beyond some of the expertise of the people we have in the city. And as part of the architect, as part of the package, I think it would be better off getting a real professional in who would really know their stuff on this. Quincy is, you know, I think if we're going to put in a new building, we should put everything we can to make it the most energy efficient, the most efficient place we possibly can. And I think, you know what, I was part of the construction when we did Quincy High School when I was working for the city, also part of Central Middle School. We put solar panels on the top of it, and not only is it good for the environment, it's also good because it returns money to the city and the electric costs that we're making. So I think when we're going to do the new public safety building, that the various codes, I believe it's called the stretch code, and those codes, which is kind of out of date, is not the best practice anymore. I think we have to go a little beyond, and we have to work with particularly when we bring in the architects. I think putting the RFP out and putting the group together is the key thing to make sure that, and if I was elected to city council, I would make sure that that was part of the contract.
Okay, next question, we'll go first to Chuck. How can we increase the city's recycling rate?
Having been originally with the first city council that brought recycling to Quincy, I know at that time we had a recycling committee where we had people from all the neighborhoods around Quincy, and we actually had wardens who would go to check to see what people were recycling. And I agree with some of my Ward 1 colleagues that we need to get the information out there. But I think it's also a little more than just the schools. I think the schools are great, and we do a lot in the schools, but I think we got to go beyond that and get to the individual homeowners and to apartment building owners and start to show them. And one thing I think we could do right away to increase recycling is we put out a stand. Right now we have bins. Some people have big barrels, some people have little bins. I think we should have a standard for both trash and a standard for recycling. In other words, when in Wollaston, when they put the bigger barrels in, there was more, in Ward 5, there was more recycling. So I think looking at different barrels would be good.
You know, again, I have to go back, like, where are these big barrels and why don't we have them? You know, I'm stunned that we don't, and we're not even doing that and making it easier. So that's, you know, the first thing I want to say. The second thing is, oh my goodness, that 15% is the percentage of recycle. It's unbelievably, I'm like, you know, I'm stunned by it. And, you know, I look at it and it's like it hasn't, you know, whether it's stayed steady year to year to year and whatever it's been, you know, why aren't we on top of it? Why are the, isn't there anything been happening yet with the apartment buildings, if that's where we place it? Where are the new rules to require, new buildings to have it? And maybe they're out there, but, talk. These are easy fixes, I think, and everything has to do with the budget, and there's always money involved. I understand that. But, there's a way to make this happen. This is a big issue. This is a very, very big issue, and we got to do our part. I'm out of time.
Okay, and for our last question for this section, we're going to stay with the waste theme. And so this is specifically about food waste. So along with other solid waste, Quincy's food waste goes to a waste-to-energy plant where it actually uses up energy in the course of being burned due to water content. Should the city rethink the way it handles its food waste? And if so, what would you do with it instead?
Well, I think, getting back to the technicals, I'm not an expert in this area, but if we're not being as efficient as possible, then, I think there's a room for improvement. I think, there's like a composting committee of UCAN, and, I think, learning from folks that know this area is what we really need to do. And, there are things that can happen now. There are places that, take it and can deal with it. And I think, back to the education part that comes up, I think we can educate up through our school system. I think, and I think it's been mentioned here tonight, but, I think the children, again, back to my earlier point, have a grasp of this, that we don't. And I think, we can learn from them, and they can push, their knowledge and what they think, back to, to the home. And I think that, to me, is something that really, really can happen and really will work.
Do you mind just reading the question again? I'm sorry.
The question is whether the city should rethink the way it handles food waste. Currently, it goes to a waste-to-energy plant and is burned. If it should handle the food waste differently, what would you propose to do with it?
Well, right now, obviously, not trash is burned, and because of the high water content, it takes a lot more energy to burn the trash. I think the city should possibly look. Talking with people down at DPW, I ran by them what they think and some of the people who are in charge. And one of the things I think is we should probably look at a trial basis. And everyone remembers the days, probably I'm old enough to remember the days when the garbage man used to come around to pick up your garbage. And I think if we look at something along that lines again, I think there are programs out there for doing it, but I think we have to come together with a policy and look about maybe reinstituting something along that line. And I think if you want participation, you have to make it so people can do it. And I think that's why I would propose doing a trial first, and then working our way into it, and then eventually spreading it out throughout the city.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. All right, candidates for Ward 6 Councilor, you're up. Okay, all right, thank you. The first question will go to Will. Why should a voter whose number one issue is climate change vote for you instead of your opponent?
So hi everyone, I'm Will Eisenberg. I live in Ward 6.
Oh, sorry, could you please
Use the mic?
It's being recorded.
Of course, yeah. Hi, so I'm Will. I live in Ward 6. So I'll talk a little bit about my environmental background. One of my first jobs was for Environment Massachusetts, writing their direct mail appeals. You'd get the mail, you'd open it up, it says, do you want to spend $5 a month to help the environment? Say no, throw it in the trash. I used to write that. After that, I went to the United States Congress. I worked for a member of Congress dealing with the Army Corps of Engineers on large-scale environmental projects. I helped cities get millions of dollars for things like municipal solar panels, get federal grants, things like that. came back here, started a law firm working with a partner. In March 2018, there was the terrible nor'easter. You know, my family suffered, unfortunately, some pretty significant damage in that storm. We were displaced. Our neighbors were displaced. And in the aftermath, I looked to the city council for leadership. I reached out to my opponent. Unfortunately, his mailbox was full. Let me tell you exactly what I would have done if I were the city councilor in that instance. I would have knocked on every single door of people who were involved who were hurt by the hurricane. I would have gotten between them and their insurance company to make sure they had what they needed. I would have been a liaison with them with the city. And that's the kind of thing we need to be focusing on, because Ward 6 is particularly vulnerable to these severe weather events. The next storm is going to happen again. It's just a matter of time. We need to be prepared, and we need to have a city councilor who both understands the problem and is willing to solve it. And that's why I think you should vote for me. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Bill Harris. Of course, thank you to QCAN. And it isn't like we don't know each other, right? Because the group met with me. We met at the Kennedy Center. In the following meeting, I put into play the waste testing, the proposal that passed by the city council. And I think you folks, if I saw on your website, you're meeting on it. Is that correct? I think you folks are meeting on it, right? And that started from me trusting you and you trusting me, and I immediately acted on it. And that's how I've done. Now, if my mailbox was full, we wouldn't have had that meeting, but again, during storms, you get, as a city councilor, you get a lot of calls, and the mailbox gets people who know me, for the most part, I answer the phone all the time. Thank you.
Okay, so next question is, what do you see as the biggest environmental problems affecting your ward and its residents? Which is the top priority for you, and how are you addressing it, or how would you propose to address it?
Sure. Well, one of our biggest, in Ward 6, one of the biggest threats we have right now to the environment is obviously one of the biggest fights that I'm in, and we're in, and that's the Long Island Bridge. Long Island Bridge, if the city of Boston gets their way, can do numerous amount of different types of damage to our environment. One starting with just the process of rebuilding the bridge and the pylons, and bringing up all the years and years and years of things that shouldn't be brought up, because it's just going to affect us. Another thing is with the Long Island Bridge, is not only to our residents in Ward 6 is noise pollution from vehicles, if they ever got their way, from noise pollution to buses that would obviously, and additional cars that would be astronomical. That would affect my ward and our environment locally. Thank you.
Thank you. So I agree and disagree with my opponent. I agree the Long Island Bridge is a serious issue that needs to be addressed. Fortunately, it's being addressed. The city of Quincy has a lawsuit against the city of Boston. That lawsuit has been allowed to proceed. The Long Island Bridge, fortunately, is going to be tied up in litigation for years. It's not currently the most pressing environmental issue facing our community. The most pressing environmental issue facing our community is flooding and flood mitigation. Now, I've talked to dozens and dozens of people throughout the ward, many of whom say every time it rains, there's a culvert that's filled up, my basement fills up. Again, when that big storm hit, people lost their housing, people lost their cars. What the city needs to be doing in order to make sure that the next time we get a bad storm, people don't lose their homes, is deal with both short-term and long-term flood mitigation proposals. Now, whether that be, setting up deployable flood barriers, as they do in some other cities, or dealing with the city engineer, as they have in Ward 1, to look at improvements to the seawall, that's what we need to be focusing on, because that is a very pressing issue to members of our community.
Thank you. For the next question, we'll start with Will again. regarding climate preparedness, actually. These were all prepared in advance. Climate Preparedness Week is something that occurs during the last week of September, dedicated to learning, service, and actions that better prepare our communities for extreme weather events, which could include floods, storms, heat waves. Do you believe our city is adequately prepared for climate change now and in the future? Does the city have good plans, and are they communicated well?
No, I don't, and
Microphone, please.
sorry, I'm used to not using microphone. No, I don't think that the city has an adequate emergency preparedness. You know, we saw when that last storm hit and so many of our neighbors were stranded and the causeway to Squantum was inaccessible. I think that the city has done a pretty good job. Does a pretty good job reacting. You know, DPW comes around, they clean out, they pump out people's basements and things like that, but they're not being proactive. They're not preparing for the next event. They're not strengthening our infrastructure so that we can better weather the storm. You know, Ward 6 has a very high senior population. The next time, you know, a severe weather event occurs, people could be in serious danger. So we need to be preparing not just for the aftermath, but to mitigate. And again, there are various ways to do that, whether it's looking at long-term things like raising some of our roads, raising the seawall, purchasing flood barriers and things like that. That's the sort of emergency preparedness that we need to be undertaking.
Thank you. Again, as far as the preparedness is concerned, I believe that the city and all of the folks who work for the city, from whether the fire department, police department, they all rallied together. I believe that they did a good job. Now, as far as Squantum is concerned, I've lived there. I've lived in my community for over 23 years, and so I know what goes on in Squantum as far as a lunar event with a storm hitting. It happens. And it doesn't happen that often, but when it does happen, the city is right there, and our folks here do a great job. I do know that the city has done, especially along the streets in North Quincy, they have just put in piping and repair work, because again, our sewers are old. They weren't made for what we're facing, and I believe that the city we're doing roads and sewers and lines all over. Every street is being done, so I think that the city is prepared.
Bill, if the city were to electrify its vehicle fleet, which city vehicles would you start with and why? And really, any other comments you'd like to make about electric vehicles?
Well, I think obviously all the management, all the folks that I don't know how the electrical vehicles, as far as the big vehicles are concerned, how they work or how efficient they are. But I think that all of the folks that are driving around checking on jobs, inspectors, that can happen. I know that I saw one of the questions probably ahead is I think the reason why, for instance, the police department hasn't started yet is because they just haven't built the new facility that they're building. So once they build the new facility, I believe they're going to have electric stations put in, and as things are upgraded, you just can't all of a sudden. There's no sense of something like that being put in and then we're going to tear it down. So that would be just a waste of money. But I believe that 3 years ago the city council spoke to looking into it, and again, I think it's a work in progress. Thank you.
I would probably, I would look at the largest fleet, which I believe outside of the police department is the DPW fleet, and then I would move to that, and I would move to implement it immediately. Now, the city council, as my opponent said, passed a resolution several years ago, and nothing's been done. And there's a simple reason that nothing's been done. No one's advocated for it. Nobody's, been able to pound the table. And I think, again, mindful of the fact that Ward 6 is the canary in the coal mine. We are particularly vulnerable to the effects of climate change. So we need to be the leader on the city council to make sure that the city does everything it can to mitigate the effects of climate change. You know, the city councilors at large, their mandate is the entire city. The ward councilors should be a zealous advocate for their wards. And that means pounding the table and, yes, standing up to the mayor when things aren't happening fast enough. So I would immediately move to modernize our vehicle fleet and institute hybrid and electric vehicles to the greatest extent possible. And I would hold the mayor accountable for that.
Okay, last question, we'll go to Will. Our city government has decreased our carbon footprint by installing solar panels on the roofs of city buildings, but there's lots more room for additional solar. Would you introduce a city council resolution to ask the mayor to explore solar parking structures, also known as solar canopies, for city-owned parking lots at schools and other government buildings?
Well, not only would I do that, yes, and not only would I do that, I would take it upon myself to find every single federal grant that a municipality can get, and there are quite a few through the Department of Energy, to solarize municipal buildings. I would work with our federal delegation to identify federal money that we can bring into the city to put solar panels on our municipal buildings.
Well, it's very simple. I think Chuck Phelan mentioned it earlier. He was part of Quincy High School and how it actually makes money for us. And solar is solar, whether it's solar, wind, I think we have to do whatever it takes at this point. I think my wife gave me a line earlier tonight. We certainly have to find different ways of doing things, and we really do. I usually listen to my wife most of the time. So, thank you, folks. Thank you for coming.
All right, yeah, thank you both. We have all of our candidates. Thank you so much to everyone for coming, and yeah, let's give our attention to our candidates, and this is an opportunity to hear from them about their views on these issues. So we will start. We're going to have to do a lot of passing microphones around. I just wanted to quickly mention Joanne has corrected her name plate there. It's Joanne Sullivan is the last name. Okay, and so we'll have one question will be posed, and we'll kind of give everybody an opportunity to answer that question, 1 minute each. Starting with Joanne, why should a voter whose number one issue is climate change give you one of their 3 votes?
Thank you for your time, and nice meeting you, and thank you all for coming. So I am Joanne Sullivan. My husband is Cantor, so it's Sullivan Space Cantor. Unfortunately, he passed 10 years ago. We have 3 beautiful kids. We live in Wollaston. Why should people vote for me? Because I understand the issues at hand, and I will be diligent in helping repair and resolve issues effectively and efficiently. It is important as a resident and counselor to be actively involved in all matters, and as a leader in all arenas, it is our job to listen to people, look for ways to help resolve matters, and work as a team in our great Quincy. And because when we work together, always works better and builds a good, stronger, happier, healthy community to live in, visit, and enjoy here always. A few weeks ago, I went into the Quincy bus building and I asked them to put a new fleet in, and the superintendent said he will get that handled, and I will follow up with that next week. I also have a new program I proposed to the mayor. It's called Safe and Sound Streets Programs to install slow speed humps and cut through streets. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. Noel DeBona here. I want to thank QCAN for having us here tonight. We talked a little bit earlier about the electric fleet resolution. That was actually passed by a 9-0 vote back in May of 2017, and was co-sponsored by myself, Nina Liang, and Joe Finn. The three at-large councils working together based on a resolution coming from this QCAN and David and the crew about doing and initiating it. Joe Finn, Nina, and I sat down together and we initiated it. So we worked a little bit differently. We like to try to work together, and I like to work with my colleagues as well. David, over the summer, came in for office hours, and we talked about the handling the food waste, the plastic ban, plastic bag ban. On Monday's agenda is going to be an open forum, an open hearing on whether you are for it or against it. So I would like to see everybody come in at 7 o'clock. We're working towards, and I will listen to anyone. Anybody gets a seat at my table to listen to your opinions and your concerns. And I weigh it all together, and I come back and I say a lot of this at the city council level. So I've been your voice, I will continue to be a voice, and that's why I'm asking for one of your 3 votes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I just want to start by saying thank you to everyone here at QCAN, all the moderators, everyone that hosted it, and to the audience for joining us here tonight. My name's Nina Liang, and I'm excited to run for re-election as one of your at-large city councilors. I'm certainly not the new kid on the block anymore, but it has not stopped me from ever being your voice and fighting for your issues. I've had the honor over the last 2 terms as your counselor, introducing issues that are important to you, working with members at QCAN and residents here in the city to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward to address the issues that are in front of us right now. I've also had the honor of being endorsed recently by the Environmental League of Massachusetts, and I'm very excited to work with them and see what they're doing statewide with the work that they're doing with municipalities across the state, and bringing that back here to see what it is that we can do to affect change more immediately. You heard from some of the candidates earlier and some of the elected officials as well that we are making strides. However, this does have to be a top priority, and I'm looking forward to making sure that I'm working with all of you to make sure it's a top priority for us as well. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ann Mahoney, and I'm a candidate for re-election. I'm currently your council at large here in Quincy. I want to thank QCAN as well for hosting this evening, and all of you for coming out on a very windy, rainy/sunny day. It was kind of strange here in Quincy today. I want to start by saying that I'm an advocate for this type of for climate control and greenhouse, making sure that we're taking care of our environment. But it does start from the top down. It does have to be something that the mayor has to institute. As much as we do on the city council, we can't force certain things to happen, but we can actually expose the things that are not happening. And that's what I like to try to say that I do on the council is I don't just ask questions. I make sure we're getting the right answers back. And if we're not moving forward, I try to say no to make sure that we're making the plans to go forward. When it comes to electric cars, we don't have the charging stations, and we can't wait 3 years or 6 years or 10 years. We need to start doing these things now, and we need to push our government to do that. The other thing we have to do is we have to look around to other communities and what they're doing. Somerville has a great program on their website, so does Cambridge, and a lot of other communities too. And there's the mayor's action committees that they go around and they all collaborate together to share ideas. These are the things that we can do now, and we can work together to make sure that we're actually affecting change here in Quincy that's positive for our environment and positive for our future. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name's Frank Rubino. I'm a first-time candidate for councilor at large. I want to thank QCAN for hosting us tonight, and I want to thank all of you for coming out. I'm 34 years old, and oftentimes I think, well, what is the world going to look like 50 years from now when I'm in my 80s and I'm hopefully still alive? And you know, we need to do everything we can here in Quincy to make a difference when it comes to the environment and climate change. I love the outdoors. I love hiking, kayaking, and I want to see rivers, lakes, streams, mountains. I want to see them protected because, you know, they're beautiful. The Blue Hills area is a perfect example. I've been involved with QCAN in the past. I was a volunteer with the Solarize Quincy initiative. That was a great project. And thank you.
Okay, thank you. For the next question, we'll start with Noel, and I guess go around in a circle again. This has a little bit of an intro to it. Last month, Greta Thunberg told Congress, quote, "I don't want you to listen to me. I want you to listen to the scientists. I want you to unite behind science, and then I want you to take real action," end quote. In a nutshell, the findings of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that is the scientists, are that the Earth is warming, it is caused by human activity, we must reduce the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and we are running out of time to limit catastrophic warming. Do you accept the findings of the scientists?
A lot of people in here tonight are specialists in this area, and I've talked about this in the past at our last candidate night 2 years ago. I would like to get all of you that are more in depth with this information at the table, Quincy QCAN, as well as these scientists. So yes, I do. Look at what's happening tonight outside. Is it caused from climate change? I would think so. Look at the catastrophic events that have happened throughout the world today, with the tsunamis, with our flooding that we just had, the 100-year storm. So I would like to have maybe a commission based on people like yourself to get together here in Quincy, not only your organization, but to give you a seat at the table at our city council level, at our governmental level, and we can work together because you know more information than myself. And you teach me what I need to legislate, what I need to speak about at the city council level. These are real issues that are happening across the world today, and they cannot be ignored. So the question is, yes, I do.
Yes, I absolutely do accept them. You know, watching her when she was on TV and when her photo was all over the news, it was really jarring for me. And I'm just going to take a second. I know I don't have much time, but my partner has 3 young kids. And we're a very active, very political, little family, and we watch debates, and we make sure that they're up to date with what's going on. In the last 6 months, every time that there's a question about climate change on TV, the oldest needs to walk out of the room. And it's not because he's pouting, it's not because he's being dramatic, it's because he physically cannot stay in the room watching these presidential candidates talk about climate change. And that is something that sticks with me every single day. We have taken steps here in the city. It is not enough. We need to continue to do more. We need to listen to folks like this 13-year-old who can't stay in the room and watch this debate. We need to listen to the concerns that they have because this is their future. And the decisions we're making here in Quincy doesn't just impact Quincy. It impacts the entire world. It starts here with us, and we should be the leaders on these kinds of issues. We should listen to these scientists. We should look at the information they have, and we should make decisive decisions here in the city and be a leader for other municipalities across the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I absolutely agree. And you do not have to be a scientist to actually recognize the things that are happening. Some of it is man-made right here in Quincy when we allow certain buildings to happen and we say that we're going to rezone flooding areas or we're going to rebuild them. Well, the problem is that we're building up every single section of our city, and when we do that, we have no place to put the water. So we have to take some responsibility as well. But I can say the same thing. I have 3 children, and we all actually work together in our home. My oldest 2 came back from school, and we no longer use plastic Ziploc bags. We have recyclable bags, and we have recyclable. We pretty much use everything that's recyclable in the house, and it's because of them being activists. I think this is something that's going to change when it comes from younger people up. Not that older people don't understand what the issues are, but I can tell you that my 93-year-old father would be probably the one that would come out and say that he wants to keep his plastic bags, and he threatens me to about voting for me. But that's just because he's 93. But it's okay because we can have differences. It's about educating them. But that he absolutely does agree that there is something going on with global warming, and we have to do something and start working together. So I'll convince him about the plastic bags. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I do believe in climate change. I believe it's a real thing, and I think the nor'easter from March of 2018 is perfect evidence that it's a real thing and that it's impacting us here in Quincy. I think that, and by the way, to anyone who does not believe in climate change, I think we should make the argument that don't you still like clean air, clean water, the beauty of nature, things of that nature? I walk around Quincy, I walk along a beach, along sidewalks, and I always see empty alcohol nips on the ground. And I think we should explore a ban on not just on plastic shopping bags, but possibly on alcohol nips as well, because they end up everywhere. You see them on beaches, along sidewalks. Thank you.
So, well, first, I would meet with your QCAN committee, because I haven't done that yet. And thank you for your dedication and time and wealth of information that I will be learning about. And go over your master plan, and then I would ask what you've looked into and what works well and what doesn't work well. I would also ask you, do you have any new suggestions? And based on all this information, then I would meet with other city folk and experts and get their take and suggestions and information. Then I would meet with the scientists that she spoke about to help out and get one universal plan here and propose it to the mayor.
Okay, for the next question, we'll go first to Nina. It's said that effective leadership includes leading by example. In this spirit, we'd like to know if you've had a residential energy audit, and if so, what concrete steps have you taken as a result?
Thank you. I have not had a residential audit yet. I am working with the folks in my family to make sure that this is a top priority for us. First and foremost, there's a program out right now to do some tree planting across the city, and this is something that we're taking first steps with. After we move forward with that, I'd love to move forward with the residential audit and see what it is that we can do to reduce emissions for the homes across my families. We all live in this city. We all contribute to the footprint that we're leaving here. So whether it's changing our vehicles over to hybrid vehicles, whether it's going and enacting composting, we do that in the restaurants we own. We should do that in their homes as well. So we're looking at that. And chairing the committee that is going to hopefully ban plastic bags once we have community input this coming Monday. That's something we're going to also enact in our home. And so I think, we talked about it here tonight, and I think we absolutely should be leading by example. And so I'm taking steps myself, and I do know that, it takes a team to make sure that this impact really resonates outside from yourself. So thank you.
Thank you. So it was a while ago that we had the energy efficiency test at our house, and there's things such as insulation and our water use, our utilities that we use gas, and we also made sure that our water use was how we use our water use, our toilets, our low use water, and our washer and dryer, all of those things in our dishwasher, the things that we have that are amenities into our home, we made sure that they were efficient when we were purchasing them as well. The other things that we do, of course, is we don't need unlike my dad who wants to keep his plastic bags, we use our recycle bags everywhere we go. We try not to use the bags when we go. That was something that we've been doing for a really long time. I remember when I was traveling to visit my family back in Ireland, they didn't use, you had to pay for your bags way before we were hip and doing that in Massachusetts or even in the United States. The European countries always had you use cloth bags and carried them like that. But we've also been doing some of the smaller things in the house, like I said, which is recyclable Ziploc bags and making sure that we're using things that the smallest of efforts are the things that make the biggest difference. Our water bottles, our teacups, everything is reusable in our home. It becomes very competitive, though, as to who's going to be taking what cup in the morning, because we all have our favorites. And my youngest daughter likes to buy more of them, so I tend to get the ones that have all the stickers and then also have dents and bangs on them, because they all work fine, even with dents and bangs. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad this topic came up because, yes, I did have a Mass Save home energy assessment at my home back. I did it back in the spring, actually. I own a two-family house in Quincy Point, and I was very happy with the Mass Save program. It's an excellent program. I ended up converting from oil to natural gas heat, and the house has two furnaces because it's a two-family, and I converted both to ultra high efficiency furnaces, and I was able to take advantage of all of the rebates and the incentives. And it kind of got me thinking, I wonder how many houses in Quincy have had a Mass Save home energy assessment versus how many have not. And what can we do to improve that ratio? Maybe we can, similar to the Solarize Quincy initiative from a few years ago when we tried to put solar panels on as many houses, maybe we can start a project where we try to have as many Quincy houses as we can undergo the Mass Save Home Energy Assessment. Thank you.
So yes, we did an energy efficient audit of the whole house. And when we bought the house in 2014, the first thing we did was, which is on Fennell Street in Wollaston. So the first thing we did before moving into the home was to convert the oil system to gas. The oil system was from 1964. And so that really helped a lot. The energy efficient audit showed that the home was in very good condition and energy efficient. So yeah, any help or suggestions, I always look into it for a better, way of handling things.
Yes, I did have one. I had a two-family, actually on Lawn Ave, which is a street over from Witten, that we did eight years ago. And then my family increased and we had to buy bigger bedrooms, so we moved to Marymount in April of 2014. While we were doing our mass save, the carbon monoxides, the smoke detectors the fire department does, we also bundled that in with bringing over energy efficient Energy Star rebates on doing the kitchen over. We did the dishwasher. We brought over the refrigerator that I did at my previous house that we had an assessment at. One of the things that I continuously see is my energy efficient bill will come in, and there'll also be a thing is you, the average, and your neighbors, and I'm below it. So I outfitted a lot of things in the house, the insulation, the lights, and I make sure that when I leave the room and we're not using it, that we turn the light off. And that's a very important matter that we do. I know that a lot of the buildings around here have motion sensors and timers that shut off, which we did at the new City Hall next door. So, thank you.
Okay. Moving along, next question we'll go to first to Anne. Research shows that increased parking availability increases traffic, pollution, and the cost of housing, and decreases walkability. Despite this, the City Council recently increased the number of parking spaces required for new residential construction. Since that vote, a new study by MAPC, it's called Perfect Fit Parking, shows that 30% of residential parking spaces in the Boston area go unused. Did the council make a mistake by increasing the parking requirements, and would you now vote to reduce them?
Thank you for this question. So a lot of thought went into that when it came to this, and I know it's going to disappoint people for me to say this, but Boston actually put in a residential parking all over the city before they actually decreased it to the level that they decreased it to. The city of Quincy has gone through an enormous change with all of the building that we've had in the city, and the developers are the one who are making out on this situation because they do not have to have enough parking for the people who are coming and living in those spaces. And those parking are going into our neighborhoods. Because we do not have a parking ban throughout the whole city of Quincy residential parking program, what we're seeing is abuse in our neighborhoods. And until we actually rectify that, it's very hard for us to turn that formula around. So what we really need to do is have an active participating plan from the City of Quincy, from the administration. These are things that we can try to do on the council level, but the administration has to be actively involved in this particular thing. But it seems to be more actively involved in the development, or the developers, rather than the neighborhoods of the City of Quincy. And until we actively take care of this issue, then making it so that it's less parking for the people that are moving into these high rises are actually hurting the livelihoods of people in the neighborhood. So we really have to balance those two things out, and when we do, we can actually go back to that and make sure that our city's walkable. Right now, it's just dangerous for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the reason behind increasing the threshold for parking spaces for the residential construction, I think the reason for that was to curb the residential development and not have these buildings, on top of each other. There's now more space in between for the parking spaces. I think parking it impacts the environment mostly when it comes to public parking, especially right here in Quincy Center. Oftentimes you have to drive around 10, 15 minutes to find a parking space, and it impacts the parking. Something else that we can do is the shuttle service that the MBTA ran between the Red Line stations during the Wallace enclosure. I heard from some residents that they liked it so much that they would be interested in seeing that continued and possibly having that be a permanent service, and they think it'll cut down on people using their cars just to get from one section of the city or the other to the other.
So just hearing this information and learning about it, I recommend that Quincy commissions a follow-up study based on the MAPC study. Well, because it's contradictory. I mean, they added more parking spaces so people can get in and out to the retail and their new building, but if it's working against us, then just, bring all the facts together and make a new assessment.
Over the last 6 years, I've been an elected official. I've walked the streets. I'm down actually 28 pounds right now, walking through the summer. And I've beaten my mark of 25 every time. Traffic and overdevelopment are the top two concerns and issues throughout the city. What we did as a group, what we did as a council was an 8-0 vote, was trying to scale down these developments in our residential neighborhoods. It's happening right over here in Newcomb Street, and they're happening throughout the city. It's my number one thing when I walk up into the porch. There's too much traffic here. What are you going to do about it at the city council level? Well, we're just trying to get around this housing boom. This is a boom right now of development. We're trying to minimize it a little bit. They want to jam in 60 units sometimes. We could probably settle for 35. We just have to be careful with this overdevelopment. We have to keep up with our infrastructure improvements to go alongside these developments. So the parking situation, I know it might have contradict what you view it as, but remember, I walk the city all the time, and those are the two main concerns that I hear the last 6 years of walking it, and we had to address it, and we did as a council. 8-0 vote. Thank you.
Thank you. So this was essentially, I think, just something that we can point to that is a larger problem that we have in the city. And so it was a rounding exercise. If you took a look at it, it's currently 1.75, and then it got moved up to 2. And then, we did also have the argument where we wanted to make the regulations for developers more stringent so they weren't developing on top of one another. Yes, this was one problem that was immediate, and we tried to address it. We need to look at an overall review of the zoning code in our city. We need to overhaul the entire zoning code on where you can develop, what happens in the neighborhoods, what gets to go into the neighborhoods, how much parking is going to be required. And we also need to make sure that if we're going to build up in density, we're building them in areas that have access to reliable public transportation. We have bus lines here. We have 4 train stations. They're not reliable. I've continued to fight the MBTA to let them know that, if you want to develop transit-oriented development, you need to make the transit part of that accessible. So this is something that I've been committed to. This is something that I'm actually looking forward to working with QCAN on, is creating a mobility study for the city of Quincy. We need to look at the overhaul of the zoning code, look at where we're building, look at access to public transportation, look at alternative means of transportation, and make sure that people aren't relying on their cars. Because whether or not we have parking spaces, Uber and Lyft are a real problem here in this city. A lot of developers say, okay, people aren't going to have young people aren't going to have cars. They won't have them. Don't worry about it. All right, well, they won't have it because they have Uber and Lyft. So unless we look at this as a larger picture and address it together so we can have lasting, impactful change, we can't keep doing this piecemeal. Thank you.
Okay, the next question will have to be our last for the at-large candidates. For this one, we'll start with Frank. I do encourage everybody to stick around, Okay, this next question is about buildings. We'll be starting with Frank. In Massachusetts, studies indicate that 67% of energy consumption and emissions comes from buildings and their operations. For example, heating the buildings. A net zero building is any building whose yearly energy consumption is equal to or less than the renewable energy it produces on site or offsets. In effect, net zero combines energy efficiency and renewable energy. Would you support a net zero standard for new municipal buildings, such as schools and the planned public safety headquarters? And I'll just throw in, again, if you would endorse that, what would you do as a counselor to encourage the adoption of a net zero standard for new city buildings? For anyone who might not endorse net zero, what would you consider to be a reasonable standard for new construction, given that it is much easier and more cost effective to make new buildings energy efficient than it is to retrofit older buildings?
Yes, I support net zero, and I think that in the coming years we have two city public buildings that are most likely going to be torn down and rebuilt. The public safety complex that we mentioned earlier, as well as the Squantum Elementary School. So those are two perfect examples where we need to apply energy efficient concepts. And I think that when the architects, the engineers, the designers, when they're giving updates to the city council, whoever is serving on the city council next year, definitely needs to be asking these questions. Can we get to net zero? And if not, what are some of the things we can do to at least be as energy efficient as we can? And the council, as far as the cost, the council, as well as the city, the administration, needs to be aggressively pursuing any grants, state, federal, that would be applicable in those situations. Thank you.
I absolutely support this, and this should be adopted into law. It sounds like a winning standard to uphold, and I am definitely looking forward to learning about the whole standard program. Thank you.
I would support this. The reason being is there's going to be a residual emissions. There's going to be a little bit left if you go zero. So just in the O'Connell building that's being built right across from the courthouse right now, we had some conditions to make sure that they had open space and a park out front, and they maintained it with the proper trees. And this will absorb a lot of the CO2 in the atmosphere. So we can put conditions in there based on the development, not only inside the building, but outside the building. We need to use skilled labor, whether it be union or non-union, they have to be skilled. And, you know, on the city council with Joe Finn before he had left, we put and initiated ordinance changes on, you know, the underground economy and having the proper oversight for making sure that these people should be on the job sites that are actually getting an actual ADP check, and they have the proper, you know, the subcontractors are properly on these job sites. So that's an oversight that we did and initiated back in 2016 with also Councilor Brian Palmucci. The three of us worked together on the oversight committee. So we need to have skilled labor, and I do support this net zero. Thank you.
Yes, I would support a net zero standard, and I think it's something that we should hold ourselves to as a standard. You know, 3.5 years ago now, one of the first things I did on the council was to write an ordinance essentially changing how projects in public land downtown get approved, making it so that the city council could be a voice for each of those projects. Similarly to capital improvements that are happening now in public buildings, we as your councilors have an ability to not just approve funding for these changes that need to happen, but putting in conditions for what it is that we want to see when this happens. Right now, we're in the midst of a 5-year capital improvement plan to overhaul the public buildings that we have here in the city. And in that process, we have a say and we have a voice in saying, these are the standards that we want to hit, and these are the goals that we need to measure them by. We need to see what the emissions are right now for the existing buildings. Do we need to cycle out old, machinery and old supplies that aren't energy efficient and roll in new ones? In the long term, that's going to save us money, and we have the ability to dictate that when these new buildings come online. So I think it is a great standard. I think it's something that we should implement, not just for municipal buildings, but for private development buildings as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So net zero is something that we should absolutely make our goal to go to. But we have to also do other things in the city of Quincy as well. So anything that's new buildings, we should be putting that as a requirement. It may actually get cost affected out because it might be too expensive to do, but we should at least be going for LEED certified and platinum. We should not be just taking the standards of these things. But the other thing that we have to do in the city of Quincy that we don't do, at least that we have not seen at the city council, is we do not have a building energy report for each building. So we do not know exactly where we're falling down. And if we did have that, and we were able to do that, we could also put into a ordinance that any building over 35,000 square feet or 35 units would also have to, this would go back to recycling or any of those things. We could put some mandates into those things where we could actually make it so that it's required for those buildings to be able to maintain certain standards when it comes to green efficiencies. But the net zero building, when it comes to the new police station and also Squantum, it's something that we should definitely and absolutely look into. But we have to make sure that we're being able to afford to do that because we are living in the Northeast as opposed to out in the South, where South area, which is much easier to be able to do. But we have a lot of things that we have to do here in the city of Quincy, and I would start with that building energy report to understand exactly what our inventory is, so that we can start actually being more efficient about how we go about changing the things we have in the city of Quincy. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right. If anybody's having conversations, I would ask you to step outside. Thank you. Okay. All right. Moving along with already getting a little bit late, so thank you for everyone for staying. Our first question will go to Brenda. Why should a voter whose #1 issue is climate change vote for you instead of your opponent?
The reason I'm running for mayor is because I live on Hospital Hill and there's overdevelopment is a problem. There's open space in Quincy that I think is subjected to possible development in the future. I'm a big fan of seaways, beach, ocean, forests, all that, and I don't want to lose anything in Quincy pertaining to open space currently.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. First and most importantly, I want to apologize on behalf of Mayor Koch. He's been to this event in each of his elections, and he was looking forward to being here tonight. There is an event being run by Congressman Lynch and Governor Baker, so protocol dictates that it really has to be there. But as the folks in the committee and QCAN know, his door is always open, his mind is always open, and that's why the mayor hopes to earn your vote in the upcoming election, is to continue the progress we've made. Of course, there's more work to do, but working with QCAN, we have reduced the amount of energy consumption in our buildings between 15 and 20%. We've sponsored, thanks to the help of QCAN, the plastic bag ban. Thanks to QCAN, we've worked to get styrofoam out of our school system. Thanks to QCAN, we've hired the city's first sustainability manager. And thanks to the help of QCAN, we're going to make a net zero test on the new Quincy Public Safety Headquarters. There will be a test on that. All of our new buildings are LEED certified, every single one of them. Our energy efficiency, we're making real progress. We certainly have more work to do, but I think by working together, we can get there.
Thank you. Next question first to Chris. Does the mayor accept the findings of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change?
He does.
As summarized for the at-large city council candidates, the findings of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, sometimes called IPCC, that the Earth is warming, it's caused by human activity, we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and we're running out of time. Do you accept those findings?
Yes, but I think I'm not a scientist. Like I said, I do love the environment, but stepping back to what's going on in Quincy alone is the 300 trees that were cut down on the streets of Quincy to put in sidewalks, and some sidewalks were put in asphalt. I mean, there's things like in a small, minor, everyday thing we can work on to fight global warming in a small bit every day. So.
Okay, next question, we'll start with you. So, Boston Mayor Marty Walsh is a co-chair of the group Climate Mayors. It's a group of more than 400 mayors who have committed to fighting climate change and to working to meet the national targets of the Paris Climate Agreement from which the Trump administration withdrew. Should the mayor of Quincy join this group?
Absolutely.
So, slightly different question to you, Chris. Why has Mayor Koch not signed on to this group already?
We can certainly take a look at that. The baseline objectives of the group, as I read them, are something the mayor does support, working toward those goals together with the city of Boston and some of these other places. The city of Quincy is actually embarking on a regional plan to protect the coastline through a potential harbor barrier. Now, that's an adaptation measure as opposed to a climate change protection measure, but that's just as vital as we go forward in the next several years. But we'll certainly take a look at that.
Okay, next question will go first to Chris. So, in the last 5 or 6 years, the city has taken important steps in fighting climate change, installing LED streetlights, putting solar panels on the roofs of schools, recommissioning building systems to make them more efficient, as you just pointed out. We're also in the middle of a process that will substantially increase the percentage of green electricity used by most Quincy residents. It's also called green municipal aggregation for the audience. But the world and cities acting locally will need to do a lot more to rein in global warming. What steps should Quincy be taking next? Asking you to name 2 or 3 steps.
First and foremost, obviously, we need to make our buildings more energy efficient than they already are. We need to continue to build on the progress we've made. Electric cars are part of the solution. Plastics are part of the solution. Buying green energy, buying our electricity from green sources is part of the solution. Adaptation is part of the solution. Protecting our natural environment as it exists today is part of the solution. This year, we've hired the first environmental scientist on behalf of the city of Quincy and a new Department of Natural Resources. The sole purpose of that position is to protect our coastal wetlands and our freshwater storm flows. Those are the kinds of things we need to be doing as a city together to move forward and address these issues. We can get there. It's not going to happen overnight, and I know the progress can be slow, and I know these things, there's a feeling that these things have to happen tomorrow, but the progress we've made in just the last few years has been substantial, and we're going to continue going in that direction.
I agree with Chris. No. I think you've been a wonderful group to help the administration move along on a lot of good issues. I'm just concerned in the future. I want to, like I said, protect everything that we have and not lose anything. So that's it.
Okay, follow-up question. What would you do to make sure the city takes the necessary steps, the steps that you support for reining in global warming and let's discuss.
I'll meet with you and meet with the city council. The city council seems to have quite a good grasp on the issues, and just do what we have to do.
Again, we would continue a productive relationship with QCAN, continue to meet on a regular basis, continue the progress that we've made. Look, again, when it comes to electric cars, that's one specific thing that came up tonight, that there's a feeling that we're not moving fast enough. The mayor doesn't think we're moving fast enough. But by the same time, there's a process here. We're not going to do half measures. We're not going to buy one electric car with one charging station. When we change out our vehicle fleet, our passenger vehicle fleet to start, that's going to be our focus. We're looking at that right now. How many charging stations do we need at DPW to maintain a passenger vehicle fleet, a full passenger vehicle fleet? How many charging stations do we need in other parts of the city? We're starting that process now. The new parking garage at Hancock Lot will have an electric charging stations. There is a charging station that's available right now at the new Southwest Middle School. We're getting there. We're going to get there. Our police cruisers are going to be updated in the next year. And those are the police chief has been directed by the mayor to look at the hybrid model that's going to be out next year. There's going to be a little bit of a difference there. We're not going to do all hybrid all at once, but we're going to let the police department go forward and test to see if these vehicles are providing the service that they need. But we're going to keep moving in that direction.
Thank you. Well, I can cross one of my other questions off of the list about the hybrid vehicles for police. So that's great to hear. Okay. We'll move to, again, this question will be first to Chris. Green municipal aggregation would provide the city's ratepayers with greener electricity at a similar cost to what we're paying now. The City Council authorized the mayor to start the aggregation process in the spring of 2018, but there's still no aggregation a year and a half later. Why is it taking so long? And when will Quincy ratepayers start getting greener power?
Sure, that process is underway right now. The city has hired the consultant. They've developed a plan to put forward before the City Council. We expect that plan to be presented to the City Council before the end of this calendar year. And then the council will deliberate. There'll be a lot of back and forth relative to the amount of green energy that will be included in our program, the options people will have, and going forward from there. So we expect a robust discussion to begin before the end of this year. But again, and this gets back to the electric cars question, we're not going to do anything that is a half measure. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it correctly. We're going to do it in a way that the community is involved, that the community is engaged, that they have an opportunity to ask questions, they have an opportunity to get the information, that they're fully educated. This aggregation project is going to be a tremendous outreach effort. You're going to change the way people are paying for their electricity bills. We have an obligation to make sure everybody is fully informed and fully vested in it before we move forward.
Yeah, Brenda, so why do you think it's taking so long for the city to move forward with green municipal aggregation? Okay, sure. That's about the city process. Okay. All right, so moving on to the waste question. Brenda, what do you think the city should do to improve recycling rates and handle solid waste, including food waste, in a more climate-friendly way? What should the city be doing and when? Sorry, with the mic.
I think possibly that the products that we're using aren't recyclable, because I fill about a 3/4 trash barrel of recycle to the 1 barrel of trash. I don't know, it seems like we're stuck at 15% for a couple of years. I'm not sure why.
I want to go back, almost 12 years now when we started in Quincy single stream recycling. That at the time was an innovative solution. Not a lot of places were doing it at that time, which allowed people to recycle more. Basically, we stopped giving out those little bins, and we told folks to go get a bigger trash barrel, and we'll give you the sticker, and you can recycle using a much larger bin. Of course, the world has totally changed over the course of that time. So what can we be doing? We've just secured a grant from the Department of Environmental Protection to increase our outreach and education and enforcement to some degree. So what we're going to be doing is going around neighborhood to neighborhood and talking to residents, talking about contamination in the recycling, and folks will actually look in recycle bins and see what's contaminated, what's not, and we can leave, you call it an oops ticket. You leave a ticket on the recycling and say, we can't take this, or probably not the first time. You probably still take it and leave the oops ticket the first time. The second time, you don't take the recycling and you leave the informational flyer. That's one piece. The other piece is, and you mentioned composting, the mayor was happy to form the composting task force together with QCAM on the recommendation of the City Council. We're looking forward to the recommendations from that group and what the next steps might be.
Thank you. Okay. Regarding construction, we've touched on the net zero that came up earlier. We've touched on that a bit. would you support a net zero building standard for new municipal buildings, and what could be done to increase energy efficiency and use of renewables for private commercial and residential buildings? What kinds of building standards should be mandated or encouraged, and how would you do that? Sorry, this question, where were we? I'm jumping around. Okay, go ahead, Brenda.
I do support net zero for the new school in Squantum if it does happen, and also the public safety headquarters. Kind of at a loss about more residential commercial development. I'm kind of stuck on the Hospital Hill situation and how many residents are going to be in a neighborhood. So I just would like to see the residential commercial slow down in general. So that's it.
Thank you. I'll start with the commercial building code side. Most of you know we adopted the stretch code many years ago, again working with QCAN, and based upon your recommendation, we adopted that. That increased the efficiency of private building. Today, our building department, understanding that the stretch code is now many years old, more than a decade, we're working with our building department to do a full review to see what other steps we can take relative to the building code. We're also working with having our department heads through Shelley Dean, our sustainability manager, that person that we hired to handle these issues, working with our department heads in the International Energy Conservation Code, which is coming up for a vote, which the city of Quincy has votes for. And that code is very, very tight, and that's one of the most energy efficient codes that we could adopt. And if that vote comes, it becomes part of the Massachusetts State Building Code, and then Quincy becomes part of that code. So that's one angle that Shelley's working on, and we're also having our Inspectional Services Department reviewing its material and reviewing the code for what other steps we can be taken to further tighten up the stretch code.
Thank you. We'll switch from the reducing emissions part of things to adaptation. So in regard to climate preparedness, I guess beginning with Chris, is our city adequately prepared for climate change now and in the future? Does the city have good plans, and do you believe they're communicated well?
Yes, we just adopted what's called the 5-year hazard mitigation plan. And for the first time, that plan, which is a requirement of the federal government, it's basically a capital plan for all the infrastructure the city needs to respond to any sort of natural disaster. In this 5-year plan that was most recently updated with a lot of work from a lot of people, is heavily focused on climate adaptation, seawalls, drainage, saltwater marshes, freshwater brooks and streams, the protection of those assets, and how we maintain our coastline, how we protect it going forward over the next 10 to 15 years. There's literally tens of millions of dollars of capital outlay outlined in this plan. I would encourage folks to read it. There was a very rigorous community outreach process with that plan. It is directed squarely at what we're going to be facing in the next 10, 15, 30 years, what we faced last year, and I see the Carters out in the audience, what we faced last year in March of 2018 was truly one of our proudest moments as an administration. I know it was one of the mayors. It was a terrible thing, but the response of this community, everyone involved, from city departments to the neighborhood, to the police, to the fire, to the people that came in afterwards to provide assistance, that is the type of thing that makes this community very, very strong. And that's why I think going forward, we have the capability to handle these issues in a long-term basis.
I live on a hill, so I don't have any flooding issues like a lot of you do, and I didn't have to evacuate anywhere, but I do have faith in the city. I think we have a wonderful city, National Guard, police, fire, and Chris, you're doing a great job.
Okay, well, we actually surprisingly have a little bit of extra time, so if there are any final words, final things that you wish I had asked you, you each have a minute to throw that in, and then we'll close. Sorry, beginning with.
Thank you for your time. I know I'm not as keen on a lot of these issues as you are. I do care about the environment and the city. Running for mayor, first time running for elected office. I love, like I said, I love the city, drive around. You're not going to like this, I drive a Suburban, so I apologize in advance. But you might see me drive down your neighborhood or your street. I'm interested in the bog in Montclair. It's all fenced around, and that's a very interesting scientific piece of property. All the coast areas, and again, overcrowding in your neighborhood. You wouldn't like it if it happened to you. The compressor in Weymouth, I've been going to meetings with that for months, years. So there's just so many issues going on in the city. I'm always available to answer any questions, so I can leave my phone number or talk to you after this when the cameras are off. Okay? That's a tough one. I'm going to meet with the Swan residents next week.
Okay, I would like to, could we, for any other questions, I encourage people to try and catch our candidates after we close. Yeah, thank you.
One thing that we didn't touch on too heavily were trees. It did come up that the perception that all these trees were taken down in the square and to make concrete sidewalks and all of that. There's a net increase in the number of trees in the downtown since this project out here has started. There are more trees there today than there have been in a very, very long time. This year, the mayor is planting 300 trees. We did a couple hundred last year. This is the most aggressive tree planting program the city's ever gone through. And we didn't really get to it too deeply because the climate change is a little bit different, but the mayor has more than 30 years of experience with the city, and there really has not been a more passionate steward of our open spaces, our green spaces, our parks, our wetlands than this mayor. From his time going back to working with Jim Sheets, to being the park director for 12 years, to being the mayor for the last 12 years, the city, its parks, its open spaces, and its urban forest is doing much, much better today than it was a long time ago. And that's something that we're very proud of, and I'm proud to work on his behalf. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you to QCAN for the ongoing partnership, for the collaboration, for the questions that you guys always ask us on a regular basis. And we truly just hope to continue that work as we go forward. So thank you.